Let's look at the introduction of your textbook from CD 114, Observation and Assessment. So first we want to start out by saying that early childhood education is a full-fledged field. There is a core body of knowledge based on scientific research and this scientific research is also included in other fields of study like sociology, psychology, anthropology. The current research continues and is published in professional research journals. Like lawyers and medical doctors, early childhood education has its own code of ethical conduct. There are professional standards, both organizational standards, state and federal level standards, and there are accreditation opportunities in many venues available for centers, programs, and training programs. Yet, our field is pressured from outside by state government. In California, we're faced with Department of Education mandates with an elementary education focus. And one of the challenges we face is in elementary education in California, you don't have to have any training in child development. And so that means that we're thinking from a different perspective and a different orientation. We also get pressure from the Department of Social Services, which handles our licensing of private for-profit centers, and even community college centers have to be licensed. Sometimes university centers are as well. And then from the Department of Finance in California, which funds our publicly funded programs. And so because we're under that pressure from state government, we are required to prove that we're following through with the things the state wants us to do. And so we have to use rating scales like the ECHRS, or Early Childhood Environmental Rating Scale, which we're going to talk about in this class. Also, we use the Desired Results Developmental Profiles for individual children and the CLASS tool as well. We have to follow state requirements in order to, if we're publicly funded, but also if we're not publicly funded, we have to follow licensing requirements, Title 22. We get pressure from the federal government to implement the Quality Rating and Improvement System, which this comes from the federal government, but the state implements this in individual ways. And one of the pressures that's particularly frustrating for early childhood is elementary and Department of Ed wants us to get children ready for school and use their approach, which does not include appropriate practices by age or focused on individual children in appropriate ways. And so this pressure that comes from the outside can be numbing and distract us from the children. What we need to make sure we do is, of course, we have to follow the requirements for where our program gets funding, but we must focus on living in the present and the details of working with the children. In order to facilitate and support learning in early childhood, ECE professionals must really see children in the present with mindfulness of the details of the human spirit and not just be focused on the pressure from the outside. Unless we see who children are, we lose the delight and joy of learning. We miss unfolding development and teachable moments. Living in the detail and the moment allows us to see a string of moments, unique yet related, that create the unfolding of the wonders of development and learning. And it could be equated with putting beads on a string to create a bracelet. We have to be keen observers, quick and passionate. We have to be alert, responsive, eager, and enthusiastic. Our job is to listen and watch closely, even though it is difficult and easy to become distracted. We need to listen and watch reliably, consistently, and do it within the routines of the everyday classroom. We need to value who the child is, not what we want them to be. Keeping in mind that children are full of wonder, they're eager to understand, they're eager to be competent, and they're able to teach us to be inquisitive, observant, and responsive. They can also help us learn about our own preferences, our own biases, and our blind spots and sensitivities, so we don't get stuck in those three things that will affect our observations and assessments of children and how we implement the program and our relationships with them. So the pull from outside pressures that pull on ACE professionals can lead to us having a negative perspective of our work rather than a positive. And so we need to step back and look at those two voices, the negative versus the positive, and make sure that what we do is focused on the positive. And you can find this document. I've only put part of it here, but there are 2 pages just before the introduction of your textbook. And so let's look at some of the aspects of that. I think of my work as the negative perspective would be very demanding. The positive perspective would be very stimulating. If it is as if I am, the negative approach is an air traffic controller. The positive perspective would be an architect designing the environment for discovery. The learning environment I create is clean and organized. The negative perspective would be I am always buying new curriculum materials. The positive and appropriate perspective is I choose things from nature and loose parts, which is what the children are more interested in anyway, more interesting to explore and discover with nature. If I could just, the negative perspective is get children to sit still and listen, which is not age appropriate at all. Positive would be take time to sit and listen to the children. I could, negative perspective and inappropriate, teach them what they need to know to be ready for school. That's that school readiness issue. That's really developmentally inappropriate. The positive and appropriate perspective discover their questions and encourage curiosity. I'm worried. Negative perspective, they don't learn enough when they just play. That's inappropriate. It's not age appropriate. It's not individually appropriate. It's not developmentally appropriate. The positive and appropriate perspective is they don't get enough time to play. And lastly, from what we're going to look at, make sure you take a look at the rest of it in the textbook. There is so little time. Children need to pay attention and follow directions. Again, that's a negative perspective and developmentally inappropriate. The positive and appropriate is children need to experience the wonder of childhood.